Hello, everyone. We are so glad that you are here today. As we get settled in and everybody gets into the Zoom room, if you don't mind in the chat, telling us your name, say hey, and let us know what school you're joining from. Hi, Jared. This is great.
Yeah.
People joining from all over. This is wonderful. Let's do us a favor, and in your chat box, if you don't mind switching where it says to from hosts and panelists to everyone, so that everybody in here today can see your questions and what you're sharing with the group. Oh, this is wonderful. Look at all these people joining. Excellent. Well, we want to thank you for making the time to be here, especially at a very busy time of the semester. First papers are coming in. I'm sure you're having tests or preparing for midterms. So thanks for making the time to be here from all over the country. I'm Beth Francesco with the National Press Club Journalism Institute in Washington, D.C. And part of our work is creating programs and support for student journalists. And we have a very new, exciting scholarship opportunity that I'll tell you about a little later in the program. I'm especially excited for everybody in this room who is getting an early start planning your internship applications for next spring and summer. You're really getting a leg up by thinking about it ahead of time. We're going to be recording the program, and the video is going to be on our website later today. As for questions, you can see you already know how to use the chat, so that's wonderful. Please drop them into the chat or in the Q&A queue at any point in time. We'll be monitoring them and trying to get to as many of them as possible during the program. And we want to thank our experts for being here with us today. As we make the introductions, I hope you'll tell us a little bit about your company's program, the types of work, the usual internship cycles, and about how many interns you take on per cycle. Shirley, will you kick us off?
Good afternoon. Glad to be here. And I'm so happy to see people from so many different places. I am the executive director of the Dow Jones News Fund. The News Fund is one of the oldest internship programs, paid journalism internship programs in the country. We've been around 60 plus years. We offer, what separates us, I think, from the rest of the internship programs that you probably are familiar with is that we offer free training. So we do a boot camp style training for our interns before we send them to their internships. We match them with newsrooms around the country. And as I said, these internships are paid. At the end, you get a $1,500 scholarship. And we take about between 80 and 100 interns every summer, depending on the demand from newsrooms. And our application is now live. The deadline is November 14th for next summer. Thank you.
Sequoia, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at NPR?
Sure. So, hi, my name is Sequoia Carrillo. I'm an education reporter at NPR. I started as an intern in fall of 2019, and I've been at NPR since, bouncing between a few different places within the building, or the quote unquote building. I have not been in the building in a long time. But I will pass it over to Christine to give the specifics of our internship program.
Thanks, Sequoia. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine. I'm our intern program manager, and I'm actually in our building right now, hence all the NPR decor. But a little bit about our program. We're actually just about to start our 6-month fall-winter internship. Our interns are joining us in October, but we also have a summer internship program, which lasts about 3 months. And that's where I hope all of you on this call will apply. We're going to open those applications in December, around December 15th. They'll close around January 9th, and then we'll start the summer internship around May 30th. We have lots of positions. We take in about 50 interns each cycle, whether you're on the news side, programming, corporate side. We're sure there's an internship that fits your interests and skills. So take a look on our job page around December for these postings. And I'll pass it over to Angie.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So good to be with you today. I am Angie Selden. I work for C-SPAN Cable Network. And as a matter of fact, I must be right down North Capitol Street from Christine. I am in the office. So right now we are working on a hybrid schedule where we're in the office 3 to 4 days a week. And we work from home 1 to 2 days a week. So the intern will mirror what their department does. And we have internships all year long. The spring is January until April or May. The summer is June through August, and then the fall is September through December. It is a paid internship as a stipend that's paid at the end. That's $1,200. And I have been at C-SPAN since 1988. We have been hosting interns since the 80s, I'm sure, but I have been overseeing the program since 2000, late spring 2000. And we have interns in programming and marketing, IT, radio engineering. It really depends on what the need is and what managers are requesting for that particular semester. So I should know more about the spring in the next week, and that posting I think will be live. With the next week is pre-COVID, I think it was about 50, 60 interns a year. So right now it's maybe about 20. So we're still figuring things out, and when we start to grow again, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you all for being here today to share your expertise and advice for people who are looking to find internships. And that process of application can be a little daunting, including preparing things like a resume, work samples, the cover letter. We want to know from the audience, what are the pieces of the application process that seem most daunting to you? We've got a little poll going, so if you could just let us know how you're feeling about these things. Cover letters in the lead there. Work samples. This is good. This is great. Excellent. Thank you. This is really helpful and will guide the rest of this conversation, which is wonderful. Christine, I thought we could maybe start with you. And what advice do you have for students as they set out in planning the application process, especially if they're thinking about applying to different outlets?
Yeah, so like I said, we hire about 50 interns each cycle, and each internship is super different. Again, you can be in news, programming, marketing, and then in programming, depending on what show you're on, or in news, depending on what desk you're on, your day-to-day duties can be different. So I would just say, really read the application, know the team you're applying for. You can show this in your cover letter, cater your resume. Apply to more than one, but just make sure each resume and cover letter is catered to that specific team. Show that team that you understand the work, you understand what that team does, and then show how your passions, interests, and experience tie into that role.
Angie, can you tell us a little bit about what C-SPAN specifically is looking for as, or what advice you would give about researching the company ahead of time?
Absolutely. I would say first and foremost, if you know someone here at C-SPAN or any company and you're interested in them, definitely reach out to that person to see if maybe you can get an informational interview or some type of meeting. C-SPAN is small. We're located here in DC and we have about 200 employees. Our archives is in Indiana and we have about 10 folks out there. So the internships are here, they're in one location. I'm able to meet with people, talk on the phone, and I know that's not always possible. So if you're not able to actually meet someone or already know someone, definitely research that company. That's so important. And if you already are familiar with the organization, let's say you utilize their products and or resources, make that known in your cover letter. That's so important. And it's not to brown nose or anything like that, but it's just to let that organization know how much knowledge you have about them already. And then you can tie into it what skills you bring, to that internship that you're seeking.
And I just would add, whatever you do, have somebody else read over your information before you send it so that you catch any typos. You know, organizations have different rules, but a lot of journalism related organizations feel like a typo is a disqualifier in an application. So just know that and be very careful. I also neglected to mention in my intro that the News Fund has 5 areas that we have job internships in: data reporting, business reporting, multi-platform editing, digital media, and a new one for us is audience engagement. So those are the areas. And I agree wholeheartedly with Christine. Cater your letter, your application package to the job that you're applying for.
That's great advice. One other tool that might be helpful if a student is looking at a lot of different organizations to apply to would be to keep a spreadsheet that you can track what each individual organization is looking for, or team, if you're applying to multiple teams within an organization, just to keep yourself organized as you go through the process. Let's talk about cover letters. That seemed to be the biggest interest among this group of students. How important are they, and do people really read them? And what do you look for in a cover letter when you're assessing a candidate? Christine, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So NPR, we're a little outdated, or I know some industries say like, oh, like a cover letter is not super important. We really care about cover letters here. I would think about it as a work sample, like Shirley was saying, make sure there's no typos. You want to know you're detail oriented. And this is a great opportunity to share your story and share how that story ties into the role you're applying for. And I'll let Sequoia, who's a hiring manager who reads a lot of cover letters, also give her insight as well.
Yeah, I think at least so I hired the intern for the education desk at NPR, and the cover letter is like by far the most important part of the application for me. Our team just really wants to know right away that you can tell a story, and it's the story of yourself. So whatever area you want that to be about, just like pick a moment in your life that made you want to do journalism, or it can be like a more, I don't know, it can be anything really. It can be the smallest thing or it can be the biggest thing about your life. But as long as you keep me engaged through the whole cover letter and I know a little bit more about who you are by the end, you're going to stand out immediately. And we go through every single application. Like there's not a computer is not reading this. Please don't try to trick anyone in the cover letter. Like it is me reading it if it's the education desk. And there's a hiring manager for every internship that reads every single one. So really just focus on telling a story in your cover letter. That's my biggest advice.
Angie, can you tell us a little bit about the dreaded generic dear sir or ma'am?
It's, you know, it's, and I should explain that. If it says sir or ma'am, if you don't know the name, I understand, but don't use the same generic cover letter for every place, every organization you're applying to. So Christine even talked about, you know, making it more specific for each internship within NPR. And I would definitely say, make it specific for that organization and not just a blanket whatever, because even though you may be interested in different organizations and your skills match what all of those folks are looking for, you still want to personalize it for that particular company, because then I know you're really interested in C-SPAN, you're really interested in current events and politics, and you understand what it is we do. For instance, we don't have reporters, we don't do like the 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock news. So if you write to say you want to be an anchor or you want to be a reporter, you haven't researched C-SPAN that much because that's not something we do. So when you make it very specific for that company and for that internship, that says a lot that you've done some research.
Yeah, we don't require a cover letter for our application, but it's optional if you choose to do it. The people who do it and do it well impress me because a lot of cover letters simply repeat the resume, and that's not very helpful. So if all you have to say in your cover letter is everything you said on your resume, that's not that's not advancing your cause. So I would just say, keep that in mind. And as Sequoia said, go for the narrative.
I think those are such good points. Sometimes even as journalists, I mean, we're just so used to writing about other people and not turning the spotlight on ourselves, or knowing what anecdotes or what pieces of that narrative we should tell. Any advice on like how to self-select what you share in a cover letter?
It just depends so much on, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sequoia. I was gonna say, I think it just depends so much on the job because, you know, and the company, you know, I think you really have to try to find that connection. And if you can't find one, then, you know, what is it that's driving you to apply for that job, and try to use that.
I also think a cover letter can be a good way to fill in the gaps of your resume. So I like to tell the story of one of our most successful interns from the education desk. This was before my time, before I was here, but she was a full-time teacher who'd gone to undergrad for, I think she went for English, and then she was an English teacher, and she was going to school for her grad degree at night. And she applied to NPR education as an intern, and her cover letter was just amazing. And on paper, she had only done like she'd done school paper stuff. She hadn't done anything nationally, which sometimes we do look for, like if you've worked for a member station or if you've worked on a podcast before. She hadn't done any of that, but she was a teacher, and there were no teachers on the team, and it was just like a good fit. Her cover letter made the team believe that she could do it. And she's still at NPR. She's a reporter on the investigations team, which is like a very coveted spot. She's a rock star, and her resume alone would not have gotten her the job, but because she kind of was able to weave everything together, it like put her on the path to where she is today.
And that's a good point. And don't feel pressured to make it a long, drawn out document. Definitely, it can be a half a page, 3/4 of a page, just when you hit some specific bullets about who you are and what you're looking for. I agree with Shirley also. You don't have to just tell me what your resume already says. And Sequoia has said this as well. It's a narrative about yourself, what you're looking for, or a story you might want to relate, and you know how it relates to what it is you would like to accomplish for that semester. So it's not a term paper. Don't make it long, and it'll be great.
That's a very good point. Thank you. We have a question from Alyssa, or Elisa, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Some organizations ask for an autobiographical essay rather than a cover letter. Can we talk about the difference in those?
Well, we do ask for a 500-word essay, and we give a talking point. So, you know, I think last year, and I think this year as well, I don't mind sharing it, it was tell us about a time you learned a life lesson the hard way. Mm-hmm. And so that you can go anywhere with that, right? You can go personal, you can go professional. And so we give you the leeway because we want to see, again, what kind of storyteller you are. Mm-hmm. But I think the autobiographical essay in some ways, to me, gives you a little more leeway to get very personal. Mm-hmm.
We have another question from the audience. What do you think about hyperlinking in cover letters?
I think this is opinion and a great thing to do, especially to show your work, or if you have like a header and you want to include a portfolio or just any other way that you can expand upon the work you've done in a way that's not clunky or, you know, oversharing. But I think just having certain links can show even a more breadth of the work you've done.
Absolutely, especially if it's a graphic designer or someone who has a portfolio, and definitely if it relates to the internship you're applying for. So it's great. Just like Christine said, you're able to see the work, and you know, it's just I think it's just added can't think of the word I'm trying to say, but it's just, it works because it's additional information, but it's not necessarily making the document longer. But we get more information if we want to click on the link. So I do like that idea.
Great. Let's turn over to resumes. What are some do's and don'ts for building out a compelling journalism resume that can distinguish you from other candidates who have pretty similar experiences, or, you know, you're at the same career level? Angie, you mentioned in our prep call that about the importance of accurate information in a resume. Can you tell us a little bit?
Definitely. Sometimes people stay away from dates because they already know they don't have enough experience, or they feel like they have too much experience, or they embellish titles. I have seen resumes come to us from former colleagues and former interns, and I'm like, that's not what you did here. That was not your job title. Or as I've conducted employment references for applicants, and they're like, no, that was not the job title. Please be accurate and be honest. As long as we see the organization, your employer, we see your job title accurate, and the dates, and then your duties, we're able to see exactly what you did and who you did that with, and you know, the span of time. But especially when we're checking references, and you never know, you know, folks who maybe is from that organization that the person listed, and you can ask a question and it's just like, no. So please be accurate and definitely be honest.
I think regarding resumes for NPR, and Sequoia hit on this, it is not a system that is reading it. It is the team you're applying for. It is real eyes. You don't need to try to game it by using keywords. We will look at your resume holistically, and a person will be reading that. I think in terms of how to make a strong resume, one thing we really look for is metrics. So if you led a team, how big was it? If you post on social media, what was your engagement? And I actually was looking through some of the resumes of interns we did select, and I saw someone that was a student blogger, and she had 13,000 unique page views on the blog, and she was an author with 100+ posts. And then she said she was the most read blogger on the platform. So even just by using those numbers, like to show how you've been successful, like that's really useful to us as a team. And like Angie was saying, having those accurate statistics to support it, that's super helpful in a way you can stand out.
Yep. Definitely show results. Don't just list your duties, but what was the outcome? What did your work result in? If you can do that. Not all jobs allow you to do that, but even jobs that you wouldn't think you could use metrics for, you can still say, don't forget about the small achievements. I was employer of the month for, the month of June for my, whatever. Those kind of things. If you're a member of an organization and you hold a officer position, say that. List the officer position. Don't just say I'm a member of. Say I'm a member of and the vice president from 2021 to 2022 or whatever. Those leadership roles are very important to show.
Absolutely.
And with Shirley was saying, with the leadership roles, say how many people were part of that organization. That can also show like the breadth of your leadership. So if you led an event, if you public spoke somewhere, how many people attended, just finding ways to add in numbers or support is always a good thing.
That's great. We have a couple more questions related to the resumes from the audience, which is great. Let's see here. Alexandra asks, do you recommend adding your LinkedIn profile to your resume?
I like to see those. I like to click on that just to see. And, we could see how many posts or how they engage with other posts, but also checking the resume and looking at experience. So it's something I don't mind.
Yeah, I agree.
How important is it to highlight skills on a resume?
Important, I would say. And again, different positions have different requirements, but I think anytime you're trying to showcase yourself, you want to highlight what skills you have, and be very specific about those skills. You know, don't just say Microsoft Office, which I see a lot, you know, but you know, if you really know Excel, say that. You know, I took an advanced course in Excel, or I, you know, have a certificate in Google Analytics, or whatever it is. I would say definitely highlight your skills.
That's great. We have a couple question from Rasika, who says, can a resume be more than one page?
No.
Yeah. I think Sequoia and I are just about to say the same thing. Of just because it goes back to the idea, what we were saying with hyperlinks, of just cleanness. Like you want someone to, and especially as a student, like you're probably don't have enough experience to fill more than one page.
And I could say I don't mind if it's 2 pages or a page and a half. I have seen very long resumes. So you're right, it doesn't have to be super long, but you know, sometimes if it's a page and a half, there are some students who, whether they're athletes or musicians, or they've done so much, and I get it. But yeah, if you can get it to a page, but if it's a little more than a page, it's okay with me.
Yeah, I tend to prefer 1-page resumes, but I don't think it would be a disqualifier if it was 2 pages. But if it was 5, yeah, that would be a disqualifier.
Edit yourself is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Edit yourself to the job that you're applying for. Related, Lily asks, is it important to include a brief description for each job or internship that you've had on your resume? Or, you know, kind of related, is it helpful to include jobs that are not journalism related?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Christine. Thank you. It definitely has some type of a description or a couple of bullet points, so we'll know what you do. Just because an organization is in a certain industry, it doesn't mean we'll automatically know what you did and what your contributions were. So we definitely want to know. And then I'm sorry, what was the second? Oh, you said if it wasn't related. If it's not going to make the resume too long, because sometimes we talked about, again, you could have other experiences that show your leadership skills or your writing skills, different things like that. So I don't mind seeing it as long as it's not too long and you can still show, well, this is what I gained and this is what I did.
I would say, yeah, the goal is to have a clean, concise resume, show you can filter all your work and experiences and just really reflect what's going to be applicable to that job. And we are more than our careers. We're multifaceted people that do lots of things in our life and our time. And that's where linking your LinkedIn, where we can look and go, oh, they were captain of the ski team on top of being an amazing journalist. Like that's a really cool, interesting fact, but I wouldn't necessarily put that on the resume unless you thought it like demonstrated leadership or some other skill that is applicable to the job.
That's all great advice, and trimming and edits, that self-edit to really highlight, curate your own experiences to best fit the position is what I keep hearing in all of this great advice. One thing I used to challenge my students to do, especially when they wanted to include all of their experiences, all of that life experiences, go ahead and start off with a document that includes all of that, and then make a new one for your journalism resume and copy the things that are most relevant in. And that way you're not losing any of that experience if you need to use it later for something different. Hitting delete on the experiences you had can feel so personal, and it should feel because it's your life. But let's move on. We've got some questions about work experience. And, you know, I'm wondering, you know, students now have such a variety of ways that they can tell stories on their campuses and their personal life for their churches or other organizations that they're a part of. What are some ways that students can frame their work experiences or their best stories in their applications? We're talking work samples. So, Sequoia, you talked earlier about the experience that your education reporter, former teacher, brought to the table. how did she frame that work experience outside of the letter? Did she include any work samples or writing samples, and how did that filter in?
So I didn't hire her. This was a long time ago, so I don't
Oh,
know
I'm so
about
sorry.
exact work samples that she submitted, but in general, I would recommend that you have a website just in terms of work samples. If you're a journalist and you want to go into journalism, just make a website, go on Squarespace or wherever, pay $20 a year to have a URL, or you don't even need one. As long as there's a place that I can click on your resume and everything will be there right away, that's amazing. Because at least for NPR, I think there is a spot where you can upload work examples, but I normally just click on the website anyway, because normally it's just formatted better, all of that stuff. Other things I can say about work samples, anything audio, if you've done anything audio, it's like a huge plus for us. That will set you apart when you're applying to NPR. And yeah, but make a website. That's the biggest advice I ever got about going into journalism.
And as Sequoia mentioned, there is spots. So we have 50 different interns, each on a different team. And I would recommend that when you're applying, you look at specifically what they're asking for, because sometimes it will be a resume, cover letter, and a work sample. So I would say choose the best of your work samples, just upload one to meet that criteria. But then, as we've been saying, and as Sequoia recommended, link your website on your cover letter, link your website on your resume, and just you can show that way your breadth of work, but no need to upload multiples actually to our recruiting software. Just provide that link.
Angie, you mentioned in our prep call that that you'll look at coursework or independent work outside of student media. If a school, for example, doesn't have a student publication or outlet for a student to get their work into the world. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're looking for in terms of relevant work history, work samples, if a student doesn't have as much experience as they think they should?
Sure. So one example that comes to mind is churches. More and more churches now have, well, they call it different things, but they record the services, and they're streaming the services as well. So you may not have a lot of camera experience at work and audio and lighting, but you do at church, and you have been doing that for a number of years. So that's definitely something. And then sometimes it's volunteer experience as well. So, you can be with whatever organization and you're providing marketing, you're doing a lot of different things. And, I know that my generation, we did not grow up with social media because it didn't exist. The internet didn't exist at first. So there are a lot of times as we were going through that students are coming in and they already have that experience because they've done it for themselves. They were doing it for schools or, nonprofits, maybe their parents, their family businesses. So we do look at that. It may be something outside of school, but is still very valuable experience. And we want to see it, like everyone has said here. Send us a link. It could be to a website. It could be a YouTube page, different things. Tumblr. I mean, there's a lot of ways to showcase that. So definitely we look at related experience, but it may be outside of media or journalism.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Curate.
I just wanted to make a quick point that we ask for work samples, and I know we sound like a broken record, but cater it to the job you're applying to. So if you're applying for a multi-platform editing position, you may not have samples of stories, but you may have headlines that you wrote. Mm-hmm. So you can send those as examples of your work. Or if you're a data reporter, you may have code that you wrote, or data visualization that you did. So we would accept that as a sample of your work, not just articles.
We have a great question from Ben in the audience who says, in terms of prior experience, when you're looking at applicants or comparing applicants, do you weigh previous internship or freelance reporting experience how do you weigh that compared to student media experience? Is work for a professional publication versus student publication? I would say student publications are also professional, but that's a different conversation. But if you're looking at those two experiences, do they have different weights for you?
Depends on the job they did. I mean, you could have an internship at, a major news organization, but all you did was, kind of shuffle paper and, it just depends on what you did there. But whereas at the campus media, you were the managing editor, right? So it just depends. I can't say that you can say they're apples and apples. I do like to see campus media experience because it just, to me, indicates a commitment to the trade or to the craft, I should say, not the trade.
I think also in how well the interview goes and just looking at that person and that individual. You can meet the requirements on paper, but we're also looking at how you will fit in with that team at that particular time and what their priorities are for the semester. So it's not even necessarily you weren't good enough or you didn't have enough or whatever, but we're looking at a total package. So yes, definitely those experiences, but we're looking at you and the actual interview and the conversation and how well you will mesh with that team for that semester. That's a very important thing to remember as well.
I want to say also, in talking about student journalism versus professional journalism, we are hiring interns, so we don't expect you to have necessarily, I mean, it's always a bonus to have work experience somewhere else, but if the breadth of your experience is heading up your student newspaper, that's great experience. At the end of the day, these are entry-level roles, and we're just looking for people who are passionate about journalism, passionate about NPR. So we're not necessarily expecting you to have a ton of previous professional experience. I mean, depends on the hiring team, depends on the role, but we are at the end of the day looking for interns.
Agreed.
I would just add to that one thing that I'm always looking for in our intern is a self-starter, someone who can really, they'll have one thing on their resume, but they've then taken it the extra mile. So a lot of times, the way that I see that with specifically student journalism, and I agree with what everyone said, it depends what you did with those places, whether it was a national publication or student journalism, whatever, it depends. But what I really like to see is if someone was a managing editor or a reporter on their student paper, but then they took one of their best stories and they took it to the local publication and got it published there. And a lot of people do that, especially in college towns, like state school college towns. Those local publications want student journalists to pitch them. And so if you are focused on your school's paper, I would recommend just taking that extra step and pitching your best stuff around, because I love seeing that. And that's a good way, even if you are interning for a bigger publication, to show that you've covered your ground and you can stand by yourself in that area as well.
This is all such great advice. We're going to come back to questions with our participants at the end of our conversation, but I want to talk a little bit about, what happens when you get an internship offer, especially when it's somewhere in a different city, in Washington, D.C. We are, wondering if we could zoom out a little bit and just talk about, things the logistics of that, housing scenarios, dealing with paychecks, and the reality of moving to a new place. That all can be pretty daunting when you're deciding whether to even apply, right? That's the thing that people can put up barriers. For our panelists, what advice or support do you have for someone who maybe hasn't left home or school for an internship before? What kind of support does your organization offer? How do you talk somebody through that?
I think for NPR, I'll say that, again, it's 50 different internships, but most teams are pretty flexible in terms of whether you're working totally remote, whether you're on site, whether you're going to be hybrid. So I would just say, really read the application and make sure that it's not one of those roles that is explicitly listed as required to being on site, I'd say maybe that's 10, 15% of those job postings. But otherwise, I would just communicate with the manager what your best situation is, because maybe that is being one of our remote interns. And we have plenty of remote interns still. So it's a pretty flexible situation depending on the team.
Again, we're hybrid, but prior to even COVID, students don't always do enough research on what it takes to relocate to a new city. Definitely DC, as you know, is a high cost of living. Also looking to see where you could potentially stay. I have some links I would share with students. I'm like, here's something to get you started. But also a lot of students work while they're here in DC. So knowing where the internships that you're applying to are located. So hopefully public transportation is easy, bus and or metro, maybe the commuter trains, so you can get around easily from where you live to where you work to where you intern. All of those things are important, but I think budget is the number one thing to figure out if you can absolutely do it, because then if you're accepted, can you make it happen? So think about that.
Yeah, we have a variety. I'd say about 80% of our internships this summer were in person or hybrid. So you moved to the city and worked out of your home part of the time. But a lot of employers felt it was important just to have the interns in the city, even if they weren't in the office 5 days a week. So we have a variety. We do have some that are still fully remote. But I would say that on average, we do what we can to try to help our interns who are relocating for the summer. I would say check colleges. A lot of colleges rent dormitory rooms for the summer, or for certain periods of time over the summer. That's one way to get an inexpensive housing situation. A lot of newsrooms try to help interns by putting them together before they get there so that they can maybe find a roommate. And so those are ways to try to manage your costs. But I agree, having a budget is the main thing. And, some internships require cars. You need to know before you go if yours does or not.
All different and very important things to think about that sometimes we don't when we're thinking about resume and cover letter and all those other pieces. I'd love to pause for just a minute to share an exciting new opportunity that the National Press Club Journalism Institute is offering. It's specific to interns who will be spending their time on site in Washington, D.C. The Lewis Scholarship offers both free housing and a $1,000 monthly stipend to one student who will be selected each spring, summer, and fall, starting next spring. So if you're thinking about applying for any spring internship opportunities in Washington, D.C., this is a great program to look at. It is for student journalists of color. And I'm going to put the information in our chat. You can find the application there, take a look. You can also find our other scholarship opportunities there. The deadline is October 20th for the spring 2023 recipient, and that's going to be selected in December. Just one thing to keep in mind, because the timing, every internship, as you learn at the beginning of this this program, thinking like a student, is that we're encouraging you to apply for the Lewis Scholarship around the same time as you're applying for your internship. So you don't want to wait until you hear back from the internship that you applied to apply for the scholarship. It's a little confusing, but you can go to the site and find out more. I put that in the chat. Also want to share a resource. Wish Housing is Washington intern student housing, and they can help if you're looking at different options in DC. And then of course, you can always email us if you have any questions about our Lewis Scholarship. So sorry for that brief break, but it's an opportunity we're very excited about and proud of.
A great opportunity.
Oh, we're thrilled to be able to help a student with this, and there's going to be more students than we can help, but we will do our best to find resources for people. We've covered a lot through this. We have a lot of questions that have come through the chat. So we're gonna kind of popcorn around with the rest of the session on questions that we haven't yet gotten to. From Aaron earlier in the session, Aaron asked, sometimes job positions will say juniors and seniors preferred. How much weight does the class status, the junior or senior, actually weigh in an application? Would you consider different levels of experience?
Yeah, we do. We'll say first priority is to juniors and seniors. They're closer to graduation. They're more likely to not change majors or that kind of thing. But we've had freshmen and sophomores as well. So absolutely, we'll take them all.
Yeah, we actually opened our program up to sophomores officially for the first time in 2022. And we had several who did quite well. So we accept sophomores through grad students, and December graduates are okay.
I was just going to say, so for full transparency, I applied to an NPR internship 3 times before I got it. I applied summer before my junior year, summer before my senior year, and then fall after I graduated. And I never got an interview before until the fall after I graduated, when I got 3 interviews. I got 2 internships that I applied for out of 3. And I think that what you don't understand when someone lists like, oh, juniors or seniors or recent graduates preferred, is that they have you in mind when they're doing that. So for NPR, there's a big culture of, if you're a recent grad and you're an intern, staying on as a temporary employee afterwards. So you're going to get the most from the NPR internship if you are applying and getting it as a recent graduate, because then you can stay on with the company and they won't forget about you. Whereas if you are a summer intern before your junior year, by the time you're looking for a job, there's been like 5 cycles more of interns coming through. So it sounds a little bit exclusionary when we say like we're looking for like seniors or recent grads, but that's why it is really because of like the culture of the internship. And for many of the front facing positions, like the newsroom positions, the podcast positions, those are meant to be almost pre-professional programs that like kind of get you into the company. We have a huge portion of our newsroom that started as interns. And I would be willing to bet that most of those people did their internship as a recent graduate. So that's kind of like the NPR specific side of it.
Yeah, and piggybacking off what Sequoia was saying, there's no like systematic or like rule that you shouldn't apply as a freshman or a sophomore. I know we had at least 1 sophomore at our summer 22 cycle. But I'll say, just talking about like our rules of who can apply, you're eligible to apply up to 12 months after you've graduated. So that it can almost be like a first job that's, as Sequoia was saying, starts as an internship, turns into a temporary position. This also applies to grad students. So if you've just graduated grad school and you're looking for a job, you either have to be currently in a degree accredited program or 12 months outside of one. So that's the rules of who's eligible to apply.
And do feel free to apply. I saw a question in the chat, like, should I just apply early so that they remember me? Feel free to apply. I applied many times. The only thing that you're going to lose is like the amount of time it took you to write the cover letter. And it was kind of a good exercise for me going back every year and seeing like how much I changed my cover letter and being like, well, obviously I didn't get it then. Like that makes sense. I'm a completely different person now. So always feel free to apply. I have hired a rising junior before. I've hired a rising senior. Like we're getting those applicants and sometimes they're the best ones, but just know if you don't hear back, keep applying.
Okay, we have a question from Rasika who asks, does being on a student visa affect your chances of being hired as an intern?
No. Not for us. I mean, as long as you can be here, that's fine. It's not a bad thing or negative.
Yeah, we accept international students who have the proper visa.
Yeah, we have several students on visa, especially for summer. I'd say something that came up during our fall program, which a lot of it is people who are full-time students and who are doing this internship. Just make sure that you're able to balance both of those. I know some visas can be dependent on you staying in school and finishing out that semester. So not super applicable over the summer, but that's just a note for our longer 6-month program, just balancing both.
We have a question going back to experience and writing samples. Margaret asks, for writing samples, should we avoid submitting co-written stories, double bylines?
I mean, if there's a way, I wouldn't avoid it. I would say avoid it if you can. If that's what you have, though, submit it. And if there's a way to say what your contribution was, that's usually helpful. You know, maybe a little note or an annotated thing that says, you know, I was the writer, but somebody else did the reporting, or whatever the circumstance was.
We had another question. What advice do you have for applicants who are afraid they might be overqualified for an internship?
I mean, you get to decide whether or not you want to apply for the internship. If you're okay being an intern, I actually recently had this happen, this like internship round where we had a guy who was almost exactly 12 months out of undergrad, and he'd had a freelance job and had done a lot of work. And at the end of the day, we were like, we're not going to not give him the job because he's overqualified for this. So it's like up to him to decide. He applied for this. But yeah, that's my advice. We hired him. He's our intern. So.
We have a question from Lily who asks, she says that she is a senior in college and is wondering if it's helpful to still have extracurriculars listed on her resume, especially if those extracurriculars were from high school. When do the high school experiences, when should those fall off a resume?
I think it's what we've been saying earlier, just like make sure it's applicable to the job. Like maybe you started a charity when you're in high school, like that's a pretty big accomplishment and maybe that's relevant, but just focus on keeping a clean resume and put everything on your LinkedIn and like link your LinkedIn, and then we'll take a look.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I say it should fall off when you have something else to replace it, but you know.
It's a great question from Carol King, who says, can you describe some of the roles and tasks your remote interns have done? So once, you know, if somebody's hired into a remote internship, what types of things would they be doing? What would that internship look like or feel like that's different than the in-person?
Well, I could say that our remote interns, for instance, the multi-platform editing interns, you know, they sign on, they're assigned stories, they edit stories, they communicate with the desk by, you know, Slack or whatever the email channel is. They make phone calls, they, you know, I mean, they do everything that they would do if they were in the office. They're just at home doing it. And they don't have somebody sitting next to them. They could ask a question. They have to go into Slack or, you know, set up a meeting to ask questions. And the reporters, I think, who work remotely do the same. They go out and cover stories and come home and write those stories. You know, it really is just the office interaction piece that is missing. And some interns have said that they don't feel like they're getting enough assignments or they don't feel like they're getting enough work when they're remote. But that becomes, I think, a challenge to the intern to make sure that they're not forgotten.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a good point, Shirley. And even when they're in person, make sure you're not forgotten. Definitely. But we've had 2 remote interns, like one for 2 different semesters with education relations. And we offer Well, we have a documentary contest for students every year. And I think each of those interns help to produce videos that we publish so we could help students along if they had questions about doing their entries, how they get started, doing an outline or whatever. And both of those students were former participants with that documentary contest. So they were able to produce the brief videos that were educational and then send it to the education department for editing and that kind of thing. So that's what they did for remote work.
Our whole team is remote. Our interns have been remote since COVID started. I live in Los Angeles. A lot of people live in DC. One is always in Pennsylvania. You're doing everything. You're researching, you're recording, you're doing interviews and editing audio all remotely. I think a lot of our interns are remote.
And even some interns that choose to be in person just because they want that social element, or they want some of the perks of coming to our HQ office, their teams will still be remote. Anything you can do here, you can do remotely.
And we'll do one more question, which I think is a good one. This is going back to something Shirley said earlier. And that is, what about, this is going back to work samples. What if there's an error in a work sample that was inserted by someone else down the line, an editor or copy editor, someone down the line put an error into your work sample? Should you include it or not?
No. I mean, I think that for me, the thing that it always goes back to is like, you're not going to be able to give me an excuse in your application. So if you're submitting something that requires an explanation like that, just don't do it, just submit something else. Just think in terms of the hiring manager. I'm reading 300 at a time. I need you to be the kindest you can possibly be to me with your samples and give me the best you could possibly do. You get like 5 minutes of my time, undivided attention. What are you going to give me?
Yeah, that's a tough one, but I agree. I think don't include it, and definitely don't include it and then try to say, somebody else made this error. It's not, because it's your name on the work. So I know that's a tough pill to swallow, but I would say don't include it.
And these internships are competitive. So we have to have some cutoff points, because there's so many great students, and definitely those errors are going to be a no.
Well, this has been an hour packed with such fantastic advice and lots of it. And I know we had some questions that maybe we didn't get to. So I'll try to get back to those folks who we didn't answer your questions. I want to say a big thank you again to each of our panelists. Thank you for being here today, sharing this great expertise. It feels like we get to peek behind the curtain and understand from the internship coordinator perspective what you're looking for, and that is wonderful. We really appreciate you. We want to thank all of the students who have made time to be here on a Friday afternoon to get this excellent advice, and for your great questions. They're really good. We will send a follow-up email with the video recording, as well as a tip sheet and a survey that we'd like for you to tell us how we did today. Want to wish everybody a great weekend ahead and good luck during this internship season to everyone. Thank you again and have a wonderful Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks
you
for
all.
having me. Good luck, everybody.
If you apply, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or whatever.
Absolutely.
I do those calls all the time. So
Paying it forward.
That's a generous offer.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.